Everyone. So today I wanted to talk to you all about fairies. And when I use the term, I'm speaking about basically the class of beings that are elemental spirits that exist in mainly another dimension on this planet, but they share the same planet with us. And you know, if you're not into this sort of thing, this video may not be for you, and I know a lot of my viewers won't be, but I think there is something about this race of beings that many people are attracted to and drawn into. So yeah, I guess I was inspired to talk about this because, you know, I've had some experiences throughout my life that were of that nature and that were with these creatures, on different kinds of ones too. So I don't seek them out, and I'm going to talk about why in this video, but I also have an open heart to them, and I do respect them. I guess I find them fascinating and I'm interested in them, but because of this I also really dislike the way in which a lot of modern people have co-opted, appropriated, and I feel like in their behavior and names really objectify this whole race and class of beings that really just, it doesn't seem they get it, you know, as well, and it's kind of disturbing to me because, you know, people don fairy wings and rainbow socks and run through the forest, you know, talking about being part of nature and crap, you know, and just doing all these kinds of things that are just I don't know, I find it just kind of cringy, but yeah. The reason for that is, and people who appropriate fairy identities, they'll have names that they draw up, you know, that are somehow supposedly of the fae. And I use the term fairy to describe basically this whole class of elemental spirits. Different cultures have different terms. I'm most comfortable using fairy, and when I speak of fairy, I don't mean just a small being that has wings, you know, and flies around. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, you know, it ranges from things like elves to pixies to gnomes to, I don't know, elemental, fire spirits, mermaids, for water, that sort of thing. All of these creatures would fall under this broad category of fairy, if that makes sense. So that's how I'm using it. And oftentimes, you know, these beings do not look at things the way we do. They have a very different consciousness, you know, and they have a very different kind of worldview, and they have, you know, a lot of them don't like humans at all as well. That's the other thing. Throughout human history, our ancestors have been terrified of these creatures for the most part because any interactions with them have been fraught with danger, with, you know, just problems for people. Even the best circumstances where, you know, there's been tales of, marriages and relationships and children between fairies and humans, those circumstances are always very, very hard for the humans involved. I don't know how the fairies perceive it, but they have a different consciousness, and, you know, their lifespans are very different than ours, you know, so, you know, what would be painful to us in terms of, experience doesn't really factor in for them. There's a trouble relating, you know, because of just a different perspective. You know, if you live in a dimension where time is very different, of course you're not going to understand human time. So yeah, there's tales of humans marrying fairies and going to live in their realm and coming back, and everyone they've ever known or loved was dead, and it really seemed to be only a small period of time that had passed. It's like almost like the opposite of the Narnia tale, you know, where if you go into Narnia, you know, you could have a whole lifetime and come back here and nothing's changed. But it's kind of the opposite. If you go to the fairy realm, you know, you could spend a few moments there and come back and years have passed. And there's also tales of people like, you know, partying or dancing with them, and then like, you know, coming upon them and like being like, oh, they're having a party, let's hang out, you know, and it's a good time. They don't mean the human any harm, but like the human comes back and they've been missing for like a year. You know, there's tales like this all the time that happen. A very notable tale in American history that a lot of Americans will know is the tale of Rip Van Winkle, which is, I don't know what the historical like context of the story is. It could just be a myth that was brought over from, you know, Europe or whatever. It could have been a tale that people had heard of something that happened to someone here. But essentially this man went out into the woods, you know, and he took a nap. He woke up and he saw these guys, you know, basically it sounds like they were gnomes, from what I gathered from the story, and they were playing like this game that seemed like billiards or something, and you know, he played a couple rounds with them and drank with them, you know, like just had a little good time. And he went back to sleep and he figured, okay, I'll go back home, you know, tomorrow, like fine, it's no big deal. And he went back. He had slept for like 20 years, I think, according to this. I don't know if he slept for 20 years or if he was in Fairyville for 20 years just playing this game. He came back to his town. He walked down, like nothing was recognizable. He was totally confused. They had to like search out his daughter, who was a child when he left, you know, like, and she recognized her father, but it was just like astounding. And all he had was this story of like, I was only gone a day. Like, no. So like people who seek out kind of interactions with like fairies, I'm always very kind of like confused as to why, because a lot of them seem like very kind of lighthearted, peaceful, happy people. And you know, I'm not saying that fairies aren't, but like they don't seem like the kind of people who would be okay with having those types of experiences. And those are some of the better experiences. You know, there's tales of kidnapping, you know, rape. It's a very common feature with some of them, especially, you know, in modern terms, a lot of, what are they called, like paranormal investigators are starting to realize that a lot of paranormal activity that they've been investigating could be chalked up to just fairy activity. When before, like they were saying, oh, you know, there's like, could be UFO abductions, but like particularly the gray aliens, because the descriptions that people have of gray aliens are very similar to dark elves, you know? So there's that, you know. The other thing about them is they shapeshift, so they can take any form they like. You know, they could appear to you as an apparition of a ghost or whatever. So yeah, like a lot of experiences like that. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I wanted to talk about the abduction thing. Fairies are known for abducting people and wanting to, you know, take human babies. That's another thing. They kidnap children particularly and replace them with their own children. Or so, you know, the reason for this is because their children are kind of different than ours. You know, as human beings, we're born pretty hardy, and it's over time and through our lives that we get weaker. But it's the opposite with fairies. They're born very weak, very fragile, and they just get stronger as they age. And so because of that, they have a lot of trouble with actual procreation. And so part of this thing, you know, people who've talked about being abducted by gray aliens, for example, the aliens tell them very similar, you know, stories of like how they have trouble reproducing and can't really do it well on their own, and their children are very weak, you know, that they do produce. And so they're experimenting on humans essentially to figure out how to, you know, get around this, you know, and if maybe they can figure out something with our genetics that will help them to have stronger, you know, children. Another thing is that fairies can only stay in this dimension for so long, you know, so the other thing with that is, like, if they're in this dimension, they can only manifest here for so long. So if they were able to have a hybrid creature that was human, they could theoretically stay here longer, especially if it was like with a fairy consciousness. And if you understand that fairies often don't like humans, a lot of that can be about like wanting to wreak havoc in human society. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't always think that's what it's about, but, you know, that's out there. That some of them do have, you know, pretty nefarious plans for us. Or, you know, just they don't like us. And, you know, a lot of humans don't like us either. So, you know, they're not always wrong for that. But yeah, they're kind of indiscriminate about it, is what I should say, you know. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, but I want to talk about the changeling thing as well before I get off topic again, you know. So anyway, there's this issue with the babies, and throughout human history, you know, people have been worried about their children being abducted by these creatures, and often they're, you know, I mean, they do it to adults as well. And I'll talk about a story with that too. But yeah, so people would often put iron around their children's, you know, sleeping, you know, beds, cribs, whatever, wherever they were keeping the baby, to keep it safe, because fairies don't like iron. They are allergic to it. So it's one thing, you know, if you want to protect yourself from fairies, if you're having too much fairy activity, get yourself some iron. Put it around your bed, because they do tend to like disrupt people while they sleep. That's the other thing. They do tend to come in the night, and it's just easier, you know, the veil is thinner at that time, and people's like mental chatter is a lot quieter, so it provides a space for them to come in, because I think a lot of the time they're very much sensitive to human thought. You know, our thoughts are kind of on the level that they live, you know, that's where our thoughts exist, in that dimension. So if we have too much of that, like it's very hard for them to manifest, you know, or they can do it, but like, you know, human mental chatter is very annoying to a lot of interdimensional beings. They don't like it. So yeah. The other thing about them is that they can conceal themselves from humans. So while I've had experiences where I've had them reveal themselves to me, you know, where I could, you know, see, I've only had I've had 2 experiences where I saw them with my eyes, like my normal eyes. Everything else was kind of like third eye, kind of visualizing sort of experience. I don't know how to really describe it, but like I see things in my mind sometimes. So, you know, I'll be looking around the room, and like with my own eyes, everything's just fine, you know, everything looks normal. But in my mind's eye, I can visualize what's there. So for those of you who have those kind of gifts, or have cultivated those gifts, whatever, if you see them, it's not only because they want you to see them, because like they will conceal themselves from you, even then, they do have the ability to do that. So, yeah, I've had experiences where, like, they've let it be known that they were there. You know, and I've also had experiences where they've, like, talked to me, or communicated with me, because I've been doing a lot of work with trying to clear ancestral kind of baggage, and I guess some of my ancestors have baggage with their race, and that can be a real problem actually for a lot of people. They don't know that, like, you know, they may be tormented by these creatures because, you know, of some bullshit their ancestors pulled that's got nothing to do with you, but, you know, as their you know, inheritor, you've inherited that crap, because, you know, remember, they're, for them, time is completely different, so they may come to settle a score, and, you know, that human's been long gone, but oh, here's their ancestors. They don't think like we do. And that's important to remember. So yeah, I just am always astounded at people, like, thinking they're cute or something. Like, I don't know where we've got this modern idea that they're just like these cute little critters or something. Like, they're not. They will fuck your shit up. They will. That being said, they're not evil. Like, some of them are very good. They do amazing things and you can learn from them. But if you are to interact, the thing about interacting with them and why I don't seek it out, essentially, like, they're very particular. It's the other thing. And many humans get tripped up by this, you know, and they may enter into a pact with them because a lot of times they're very good at magic. And, you know, they'll teach humans this stuff, you know, and a lot of times when people are, like, conjuring spirits to help them, you know, develop their skills and enter into pacts with them, it's fairies that they're doing this with. They may think they're other creatures, but most likely it's a fairy. One way of knowing is that it's your pact is kind of full of weird shit, you know, that you're being asked to enter into, like, and you have a lot of demands, and they get pissed off if you do not follow your fucking demand, like what you say you'll do. Which is another thing, like, you know, some humans can, you know, humans are very understanding about, like, circumstance and stuff. They can let things go, but, like, fairies, no. You said you would do something, you do it. They don't play around with that. So, yeah, like, they're not lighthearted creatures. They're very different, you know. So, yeah, but I do love them, and I am fascinated by them, as I said, but I just don't really want to seek them out or, like, work with them that intently. But I appreciate them, and I, you know, try to honor them and just be respectful, you know, and if they do show up, then it's like, okay, well, let's have a respectful interaction, you know, as much as possible. But yeah, I absolutely 100% believe in them, for sure. I think even if I hadn't had the experiences that I've had, you know, there's something in a lot of people's hearts that I think believes in them, like, very deep in our core. Like, we know that we're not alone in terms of, like, being a dominant race on the planet. I think that's big, and I think we also remember, like, our ancestral fears of them and that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, so, I didn't talk about changelings much. This is important. So before I go, I'll talk about the changelings phenomenon. So yeah, people put iron around cribs and stuff to protect their children and themselves. But yeah, sometimes, you know, this wouldn't happen, or, like, whatever, people couldn't afford iron or whatever happened. But a fairy would sneak in and steal the baby or child and replace it with one of their own. And usually, like, people would know that this wasn't right. And basically the idea was, if this was to happen to you, what you could do to get your child back was to basically threaten this child's life. So a lot of people would, you know, threaten to drop the child on the fire, and then the moment that you would like drop the child on the fire, the fairies would appear with your own child, or you could leave it to exposure, like out in the woods, and they would bring you your child because they don't want their own race to die. But yeah, this kind of practice is pretty fraught with problems, because not every child that this happened to was an actual changeling. This was a way that people would often kind of diagnose or understand like a sudden illness that didn't make sense, that may have impaired a child or changed a child's personality. This is how they would, you know, understand it. So yeah, unfortunately, many children died from this practice. I don't know if the fairies have brought people back. That's the other thing. I don't think they can be intimidated into that. If they want someone, they want them. Yeah, there was also a story in Ireland in, I think, the 19th century, like late 19th or early 20th century, like very recently, of a man who killed his wife, and he was on trial for it. And his defense was that he believed she was a fairy changeling, and it wasn't his wife that he had killed. And there were quite a few witnesses in the town or village that corroborated his story. Like, they were 100% on board with it. And I don't know if this was a case of like possession. That's the other thing. Like, they have that capability as well. But like, they can take over a person temporarily, or, you know, if, in the case of like certain people like who might have a weaker constitution or just not have like a guarded enough mind, they can, you know, take over. So yeah, this guy got a priest to come to the house because, well, his wife had been going to this mound, this place essentially that was off limits to humans, and, you know, in traditional places, and even in some cultures and places now, there are areas where you don't go because they're fairy places. And it's thought that if you go there and disturb them, they'll, you know, wreak havoc in your life. And so anyway, this woman, this guy's wife, had been going to this mountain. She'd been visiting it regularly, which he thought was really suspicious, you know. And a lot of people were suspicious about this too. Like, why is she going there? And it's believed that she had found a fairy lover. You know, she was whatever, you know, visiting her lover there, and one day she came back and she was totally different. So her husband was like, okay, this is a changeling, this is not my wife, this is a fairy. And she was acting all kinds of just, you know, like crazy, like they couldn't understand it, like it was just, it wasn't her. Essentially, everyone that saw her was like disturbed, like, what is happening? And yeah, the priest came and he like did an exorcism of a sort, and like she seemed to return back to normal or to calm down, and everything was fine. And then a few days later, she started up again, and he was terrified, and he killed her essentially and brought her body to the mound, because the idea was, you know, if you do this, then they'll give you back your human. And they never did. So yeah, he killed this woman or fairy, I don't know, for nothing, because he never got his wife back. And yeah, he went on trial for murder, and that was his defense, and I think he got away with it. Like, whatever. This is one of the few tales where a man kills his wife where I'm like, you know what? Maybe he did think she was a fairy. Like, yeah, so humans have had really fraught interactions with these creatures, so I'm always just very confused when people treat it so lightheartedly, like, and they're also very, like, you know, kind of, I don't know, that gross kind of, like, pseudo-spiritual, like, I don't know, woo-woo crap, like, that people are into, like, they kind of project that kind of, like, stuff onto it, and I'm like, fairies are very fucking dark. Like, they kill people. That's the other thing, like, there are fairies that lead people to their death. Water spirits especially are known for this. Like, they often seduce people in their sleep to, like, go and drown themselves, which happens quite often. You know, even nowadays, also, like, air spirits can, like, talk people into jumping. They're very powerful. And this is the other thing, like, why I think it's important to really learn how to control your thoughts. Because, like, they are able to mentally influence humans. So often if you're having, like, really strange, like, thoughts that don't line up with, you know, what your values, what you are, that sort of thing, like, really wonder to yourself, are these my thoughts? Because not everything you think is a product of your mind. It's important to know that. Like, sometimes it's external. And I talked in my video on the state of possession, you know, I probably didn't go into this that much, but, like, this is important to consider. Like, are your thoughts your own? It's very important to know your own mind and to do that kind of, like, work of learning how to clear your mind and understanding how your thoughts form and, like, understanding your own inner voice. Because you can have thoughts, visions, things come into your mind that are the product of, you know, society programming, you know, subconscious subliminal messaging, and also you could get it just from a fairy. So yeah, think about it. So yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to say about them. I'm totally fascinated by these creatures, and, you know, I've asked people before if they've ever had, like, experiences with them and seen them. I don't really want to talk about mine so much, but I've had some, like, really crazy ones. But yeah, learning more about them and understanding them, like, it's just, like, expanded my mind so much, and it's, like, really kind of given me so much clarity about, like, the paranormal itself. Like, yeah, so let me know what you think. I guess this video went a lot longer than I wanted to, but really I could rap all day about this subject. I have so many fairy tales. That's the other thing, fairy tales. If you ever read fairy tales, they're really fucking dark. Like, they're not lighthearted. Children get eaten and stuff. You know, people go missing, people die, brutal deaths, and cut off parts of their bodies. Like, they're not lighthearted tales anyway. So yeah, disrespect them, you know, the fairy race. Don't project this weird human, like, idea onto them, but try to understand them, I guess, and honor the fact that they're, like, serious. I guess that's the thing I don't like. The way in which they're portrayed and people kind of are into them nowadays a lot of the time is so just lacking in seriousness, and they should be taken seriously. So yeah, I guess that's all I want to say. Yeah. Later.